Kurusana.
You respond by clapping. That's what we used to do when we were young.
Well, let me be young.
Yes, that's it.
All the way in Slovakia.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in, Isaac. So you had asked a question to Prof. Repeat the question.
Well, the question I had to ask was based on a precedent that we have in the country when you talk about bold decisions. If my memory serves me right, something happened in the Kibaki era. There was a year in which we didn't have any new development projects. A year. Not 6 months, a year. Which means a lot of the spending that we see governments after the Kibaki government have engaged in did not exist. But it's during that period that things like the ETR and all these mechanisms for ensuring that we mop up every monies that the KRA can mop up came into being. And then it was implemented. Now, the net result of that particular process was something that I didn't think I would ever see in my lifetime. A point where Kenya can actually collect enough money to run its affairs, its own affairs, without necessarily looking to ask who it is they can borrow from. Now, I call it a precedent because it means it has been done. We have said we are not spending money on new development projects.
Yep, that's a promise, actually a pledge that was made by the cabinet this year, that, we are going to do two things. One, we're going to have a zero-based budgeting, and you'll explain that, Prof. And we are heading towards running a budget that is balanced.
It's interesting that you are referring to the government of the late Mwai Kibaki. Because in 10 years into Mwai Kibaki's government, if all you can remember, people had forgotten there was something called IMF. People had forgotten there was something called World Bank.
Yes.
We were probably funding about 95% of our budget.
Yes.
And when somebody said Najivunia kuwa Mukenya, it actually made sense. Because you cannot be a very proud father if you are sponsored by other people. Or you cannot be a very proud owner of any asset if you are sponsored. So people feel very proud when they can take care of their lives. And that's what makes hustlers in this country very proud that they can take care of their lives. So the question has always been, how did IMF and others come back? Because that's a question you should be asking. I think one of the questions, one of the reasons why IMF and World Bank are coming back is because we invited them. I don't think IMF brings themselves to a country. You invite them.
No, you look for them.
You look for them because you want to change your economic situation. You don't have enough, you cannot raise enough money for your budget. So I agree with you that zero budgeting is good, where you make sure that the revenue and the expenditures balance. The question is how to do that without running a deficit, without affecting your political base, without sacking people, without taking people home. But Kibaki's era showed it is possible. And there's no reason why we cannot do it now. One of the biggest problems that we face when you think about reducing the government expenditure is people say, instead of reducing government expenditure, why don't you reduce corruption? Because I think that's the biggest problem everybody talks about. If we target corruption in this country, we reduce corruption in this country, I think all these budget deficits we are talking about would disappear. Again, that calls for people who are bored. There should be no sacred cows. If you misappropriate public funds, you should have consequences. But as long as there are no consequences for getting away with the public funds, we are going to keep on talking about balanced budget. We are going to keep on talking about reducing the costs, about making sure that we freeze certain expenditures. But as long as people see that money is leaking elsewhere, I don't think we are going to make progress. So my argument is, let's have a balanced budget, but also, as we think of reducing the costs, let's also reduce the waste through corruption and other necessary expenditures.
In terms of the realities that Kenyans face, even as we look at, I keep remembering this, in those Kibaki years when he had frozen, let's not have any new development project, let's finish the ones that we had. Our economy has started growing. It's at now 3%, it's going by 3%, by 4%, and so on and so forth. I remember opposition leaders led by the leader of official opposition, Uhuru Kenyatta then, holding a press conference and asking people, wewe, uko na pesa kwa mfuko? Hii economy wanasema is growing. Can you feel it? Right? Those are the questions being asked then. And those are people, that's how we ended up with people still feeling disillusioned. When Alfred Mutua launched the campaign, Najivunia kuwa Mkenya as government spokesman, people coined it to Navumilia kuwa Mkenya.
I remember that.
They were not feeling that the Kujivunia bits.
That.
Later is when you look back and you're like, actually, yeah. So in the thick of things, people don't realize when things are getting better. The frog doesn't realize that the water is actually getting cooler,
but you see,
and not hotter.
As a politician or as a leader, one of your biggest tasks, and the president alluded to that the other day, is how you communicate that to the people. You know, I can call you Mujinga and you start laughing, but I can call you Mujinga and you slap me back because of the way I put it. So I think communication is very important. If you believe that the decisions you are making today will have a positive effect 5-10 years from now, the way you communicate it really matters. So I think we can make sacrifices as individuals, as institutions, as government, but how do you communicate that to the ordinary people? How do you make people believe that I have no money today, but I have more money tomorrow? And I think that's where Kibaki succeeded, by making us believe that tomorrow is better than today. But we don't live on hope, but there must be reality.
Prof, I like what you've said, but consider, what had we come from? When people spoke about having money, the reference was the previous government of Moi. So
yes.
So what did they mean having money? Was there a lot of liquidity in the country?
Pesa ilikuwa inafika hapa kwa watu.
Precisely.
Huyu amefungia pesa huko juu.
Right. But there's something else that happened in the Kibaki era that we must not forget, because we had forgotten about it, completely forgotten about it in the 24 years of the Moi era. And that was, you didn't need an individual to give you money. You could go to an institution and get money. And it was possible because the government was not borrowing from the banks. So banks had to create kiosks to beg people to borrow.
Yeah.
Literally, I'm saying it because that's what it was. You found these small kiosks everywhere.
Yep.
And banks were giving loans. So Kibaki understood the only way you do this thing is you institutionalize it, you structure it, you actually, that is when people were able to do things that previously they were not able to do. There was something called a personal loan. A lot of people's lives changed because of that one commodity called a personal loan.
I think you need to be even more bold than that, because if you look at the growth of the economy, the economy is not grown by the government. It's grown by you and me.
Yeah.
So any economy in the world, in fact, if you ask, does the government anywhere own a shamba? The government doesn't own a shamba. So if you look at any service, any product that is sold in this country, it is produced by you people like you and me. So that's why access to credit is very important. I can get credit from banks, from my neighbors, from my relatives, wherever I want, so that I can put that money into economic productivity. So the question you should be asking now is credit easily available? Remember, because the government is not getting enough taxes, the government is also borrowing like you and me. And who doesn't want to borrow from the government? Who doesn't want to lend the government money? So there's some crowding out effect. So we expect that one of the things to turn out the economy is to make credit more easily available to you and me, because we are the people who run the economy. But you should also have mentioned that during Kibaki era, something else happened that was very important. Self-dependency. He said, no Harambee. So people aren't, I don't need to depend on you to do something. I can do it myself. And that was a very positive change in this country, that people started realizing that things can happen. I can do something. I don't need to rely on my neighbors or my friends and so on. So those are small things that have happened in this country that makes us believe that things are possible. This can be done. So what's happened today? Instead of credit growing in productive areas, we're having credit growing in Ifuriza. Now, if you go and take a taxi nowadays, the guy will tell you, "Sinilipe na M-Pesa because in Ifuriza."
Yeah.
So we need to focus on areas of economy that matters and give us jobs, that give us development, and you see an effect. But we must be patient, and that vision must be communicated by our readers, that today might be painful, but tomorrow can be better.
But then, just like you said, because of having to balance, even after being pushed by the Gen Z to cut back expenditure on the budget, the government was unable to cut back expenditure to 3.6 trillion shillings as previous. It still has to spend 3.9 trillion shillings. By the end of the year, we'll be up to 4.2 trillion. That's for sure. And where is that extra money coming from? The domestic market is playing a huge part of it, which is now where the government is just borrowing and we are not being lent money. Survey released yesterday by the Central Bank of Kenya is actually showing that banks are holding on to their cash and not lending to individuals and businesses. They are preferring to give it to government. And that's why SACCOs are now leading in lending to people.
That's what I said a few minutes ago.
So now
how does
the government now balance this? Like you said, this government has got to balance between the political interests, the realities of the life it's living.
You know, that's a very, very scaring report when you say that banks are holding money instead of lending to people like you and me, because they want to let the government because more secure. Now, remember this, if you're a bank and you have 1 billion to lend, it is so efficient to lend it to one government rather than splitting it into 1 million people, and you have an account, you have to monitor it, you have to follow up.
Different risk profiles.
So from an operational point of view, it makes sense to lend the government. But from an economic point of view, it makes more sense to lend that money to other people, because you are multiplicity of creative people, ingenious people. Than today. Because if I get a loan from the bank, it might take me 10 years to repay it. And the only way I will be able to take that risk is to believe that tomorrow is better than today. I will get some returns. I will invest. Whatever I buy will be useful. It will help me make more money. So let's start also by building the confidence in the economy. And if I look at, for example, the U.S. campaign, I listened to Kamala Harris. I listened to Donald Trump. I always sense a message of hope, a message of confidence, a message that tomorrow's America will be better than today. And that's what we should be hearing from our leaders, from the MCAs up to the president, that tomorrow is better than today. But it's not just a message, but telling us this is what we should do. Credit should be available, easily available.
I was with some Bokusu friends over the weekend, and they insisted, she's not Kamala Harris, she's Kamala. Kamala Harris. So here we are, Prof. The people in the economy would like to be able to access credit. People would like to be able to access capital so that they can try out businesses, they can do the things that they'd like to do so that they can improve their own lives. And the government knows this. Everybody knows this.
That's true.
Right? Even the banks know. Yeah. I mean, if we lent to the public, it would help grow the economy. And if we lent to the government, the money they'll pay us back and all those things. But nobody's doing it.
Because of that uncertainty, that confidence I'm talking about. If we are sure that the economy is going to do very well in the next 10 years, and people believe it, sometimes we believe things are bad even when they are good. If people had confidence in the economy.
Are you suggesting that people are not borrowing because they don't have? People are trying to borrow, but the banks are putting all these stumbling blocks. I'll lend you the money at 25%.
That's the question to be asking. Why is the credit rate, why is the interest rate so high? Is it because the banks are greedy? Is it because banks don't believe in us? One of the problems we are having now is that when the economy is doing this badly, as a bank, I would find it very risky to lend to individuals, because they will start a business that might not go very far, that might flop. So I'm very cautious. And if I have to lend you, I have to put it at a very high interest rate so that if Kamau fails, that can be paid by Onyango or somebody else. I'm not talking about Murima. But people are thinking about the risk. Banks are thinking about the risk. And they're in business, so they don't want to take a very big risk. That's why they are focusing on the government, which is less risky.
Okay.
But if we build confidence in the economy.
In the banks.
Confidence in the economy. And people believe that things will be better tomorrow. The banks have no problem lending money to Kamau, Joroge, Onyango, and Hamara. To easily do that.
So essentially, the government, the banks, when looking at the elements of risk in their business, they look at the economy and they will decide that this economy is not good for business, neither is it good for new businesses. So lending money, the likelihood of this money not returning is very high.
And look at the non-performing loans. They have been going up.
Yep.
So why take more risk? Give it to the government, which will give you money with the interest. Even the money that was lent to Idi Amin government was paid back. That's the beauty about the government. You always get back your money.
But also, Kenyan banks are accustomed to making money from government, and this is something that, if we think this is an era where, in the Moi era, interest rose up to even something like 40%. So this is nothing, believe me. But there is a problem with that thinking because banks move away from their fundamentals of their business.
I have a solution for that.
Yes.
There is a rumor that has been circulating in this country for a very long time that Kenya is overbanked. One way to reduce the interest rates is let's have more banks. They will compete and the rates will go down. Now about 5 banks control 70% of the Kenyan market. So there's no competition. I don't know why we don't have...
What do they call that? An oligopoly?
Yes. So why don't we have, for example, community banks? So that if I go to my village, there's a small bank.
Yeah.
Like the way SACCOs have been doing. So if we had more banks, they would compete. And we also need to have more focused banks. A bank maybe for agriculture. A bank maybe for construction. So that if I'm running a business, I know the bank too. Now banks do everything. And they have made everybody convince this country that this country is overbanked. We don't know to start new banks.
Essentially, we are suggesting in a conspiratorial manner that the big banks are not in favor of other banks coming into the market and competing with them.
And they're still making more money.
That's why they make so more money. You check the results of other banks in the world.
It's almost criminal because in the midst of the financial woes of this country, Eric and I talk about this every day. We look at the profits, you say, "Eish!"
And they make money when the economy is doing well, when the economy is doing very badly.
Yeah.
They are always
Yes.
making money.
Arguably, they have shareholders. Arguably, they're a business. Arguably, they're supposed to make money. But that imbalance, unfortunately,
It's a bit high.
It cannot be justified by what I've just said.
So that's why we want credit that's easily available to the people who have ideas.
Yeah, but that can only happen when you have a government that ensures that it does that. Because if you have a government that's competing with us for the same credit, we can't compete.
Maybe that's what's happening. Even the central bank report is indicating that more and more people are going to SACCOs.
Yes.
And of course, the other place where they're going to is the microfinance institutions.
And Shyrox.
And Shylox. And so you're seeing now the establishment of another credit market that is outside of these big banks that is developing.
Which is good because now maybe banks will behave when they see there's competition.
Prof, when we saw banks creating what I call kiosks, it was that wake-up call in that era of the Kibaki government because suddenly there was no government to sell money to.
That's true. That's very true.
So they went back to their core business and they started looking for individuals with whom they could do business. Now tell me, in that era, surely, the default rates were not anywhere. The default rates we speak of now did not happen then.
And the economy was vibrant. It was growing.
Precisely, the economy was growing. Yeah. So in this era, when someone tells me the economy is growing, I really have to wonder what we're talking about.
In fact, that's a question everybody asks me. You're an economist, tell me if the economy is growing, where is the money? Because
actually, Prof, where's the growth?
What answer do you give?
I should tell them that the economy is growing, but because of inequality, some people are getting money, others are not getting. And some of the growth is driven by big projects that do not always have trickle-down effect to Wanjiko and others. But what we're looking for is a balanced growth so that everybody has a stake. During Kibaki era, Mama Mboga could tell you things are good. Sophisticated businessmen in the corporate world would tell you things are good. I think now there's a lot of imbalance, that some people are doing very well, others are not doing very well.
There's a shift that happened that I think has carried on in this era that I must speak of as I see it. There's something that had not been assumed in an earlier time, that indigenous Africans could do certain businesses. Now, I look at something like Equity Bank. It's an African bank, Kenyan. The shareholding now is different, but it's an African bank. I look at Family Bank, okay? These are banks that grew. They're indigenous.
That's true.
Everything about it was local. If foreigners came and bought into it, it was much later because they were already making money.
That's true.
But also the management of it was local. Now, it meant that the citizenry had acquired sufficient confidence in understanding that they could run something on their own and it could do just as well.
That's the confidence I'm talking about.
Yes.
Now, you should even make it more dramatic.
Yes.
Suppose we had an equity in every sector, so that in health sector, we have hospitals that are doing so well, they are going to Uganda and the rest. Equity and other banks have crossed the borders.
Yes, they have.
So can you imagine if the other sectors in Kenya were doing as well as banks? So that when I go to Nigeria, I can find the Kenyan hotels chain. If I go to Saudi Arabia, I can find the University of Nairobi with a branch there. So when people have confidence in a certain sector, in certain institutions, they tend to grow. And I wish the same confidence in Kenya's private sector, finance private sector, like banking, can cascade to the other sectors of the economy. So that we believe we can compete with the Barclays Bank, we can compete with the Standard Chartered. Because that's what happened in the finance sector.
Yeah.
But Equity didn't just compete. Equity does better than them.
So can we also do the same in other sectors, whether it is health, whether it is education, whether it is in trade? Can we do as well as banks have done in this country? They have been I'm very proud of our banking institutions.
But look at the manner in which the citizenry also supported the banks.
That's true.
You only need to look at the clientele base. When someone tells you 15 million, you 20 million, it tells you people have confidence. But if you look at the service also, you found that they actually sought to meet the needs of the individuals who banked with them. That is the reason why it grew.
That's true.
Because a local bank will know what the locals need.
They speak your language.
Yes, they know you. They understand you.
It's the same reason why you find some supermarkets like the ones you are advertising this morning. Naivas is doing very well. Because Naivas understands my problems better than maybe a foreign supermarket.
Yes.
And that's why I should mention them, because you know that ShopRite came here and left. But Naivas is growing. Because when I went to those shops, you find the shop has been brought from South Africa with no adjustment to the local market. But if I find, for example, some pieces of cabbages on the floor of Naivas, that's very normal. but if you go to the other supermarkets and find some piece of cabbage, what is that? And I'll give you a good example of a bank. I won't name the bank. It was raining.
Yes.
And this bank decided to hire a shoe shiner, so that before you get to the bank, they clean your shoes.
Oh.
The other bank poured sawdust. So guess which one had more customers? So this bank that was pouring sawdust understood the Kenyans very well.
Yes.
This other one was saying, Muna uchafu, you should not get in. So I think one way to
Sawdust and that kachuma for...
Yes. So I think in addition to the government doing its work in regulation and creating a conducive environment, we also must make people believe in themselves. And I like your argument that we can learn a bank, an international bank, a global bank.
Yes.
And in other sector, we can learn global health sector.
Yes, we can.
We can even make cars. Why do we still have one Nyayo car made in 1980? Why can't we have Kenyan-made cars? Why can't we have Kenyan-made other products, Kenyan shoes and so on? So I think it's the time we started believing in ourselves. And that starts from the political arena. That make people believe themselves, make people believe in the possibilities. You see wonders in this country.
Those guys believe in themselves. They're making money. They don't believe in us.
That is the paradigm shift that we need. So that when a young boy is growing in Shamahoho or in a Karakara, he believes that he will be the next Bill Gates.
Yes.
And we facilitate that.
Yes.
To make him the next Bill Gates, the next Elon Musk.
Prof, always a pleasure having you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Professor Exen Iraqi from the University of Nairobi, an economist, has been our guest. Keep it here for more conversations. It's 8 a.m.
It's now 8